Hello everyone. Thank you all so much for your patience. We had a bit of a delay there, but we got it all sorted. And also, as an Irishman, the whole thing of like, we say 10 o'clock, we normally end up starting at 11. So this is way on time for me personally. Don't know about the rest of you. But first of all, thank you all so much for coming to day 3 of Planetiers World Gathering on Impact Tech. The whole morning is going to be dedicated to that topic alone. And the one interesting thing that I found throughout talking with the very many speakers that you're going to see, all brilliant, all have their own unique perspectives on the world, is how much they think about the human element. When we hear about tech, we think about the technology, the software, the hardware, but we keep forgetting that it's the humans behind it and how it serves them that is really important. And I'm delighted to say that each of our speakers, each of our presentations, all touch upon that in some way, and I think you'll find it a very interesting morning overall. So our first discussion is going to be on Ethical Web 3.0, which is going to focus more specifically on the world around us rather than, the technology or the software itself, and building structures that serve people rather than exist in parallel with ourselves. So to start off, we're going to have a great presentation from David Orban, the Managing Director of Beyond Enterprises. David, I'll give the stage to you. Give a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, everyone. These opportunities for me are always wonderful, and I am always looking forward to make sure that they are a starting point. With Beyond Enterprises, which I am leading as managing advisor, we look forward to analyze technologies adding value to our clients and their projects. If you want to take a photo of the slides, take this photo, which will allow you to download them all, and then you can just concentrate to my delivery for the rest of your time. The technologies that we are seeing are coming very rapidly. I have been in particular in the world of Bitcoin and blockchain since the very beginning. This is the first tweet that I sent about Bitcoin in April 2011. And as a little anecdote, around the 10th anniversary, I sold the tweet as an NFT, and someone bought it. I asked them, what are you going to do with it? And he said, oh, I'm just going to wait another 10 years and see what happens, what that tweet is potentially going to be worth then. And many of you hear about blockchain and think about it, especially in this venue, talking about sustainability in terms of waste. And many of you subscribe to the view that, that Bitcoin in particular is to be seen in this negative light, forgetting how it has to be compared with the cost and impact and negative externalities of the existing financial system that it potentially is replacing. The white paper that introduced Bitcoin, written by the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto, actually doesn't even mention the activity that today we call mining, that is securing the transactions. It is not labeled mining. And in an article in Bitcoin magazine 8 years ago, I proposed an alternative metaphor, which in my opinion is much more adept. The activity of weaving, which is communal. The threads are the transactions, the applications are the emerging patterns, and the more people participate, the stronger the thread count of the textile is going to become. Now, I am telling you this because the way we talk about technology matters. The way we talk about technology defines the way we think about technology. The narratives, the metaphors, the analogies that we use shape our thinking and shape our expectations and beliefs about how technology will play out. I had the privilege of collecting my thoughts about this and other topics in my book, Something New, which if you want to get in more depth about these topics, you can check out. And one of the things that I want to stress in today's brief introduction to our panel is how technology is a mirror, how technology reflects not only the way we think about technology itself, but the way society enables technology to play out, and it reflects the nature of our society. In particular, we see AI systems that are tested and are rolled out, and then they still turn out to be prone to biases and misjudgments and make many, many mistakes that we believe should be avoidable. And some don't realize that the training that those systems received is based on data that reflects the way our society actually works, and that those biases are in our society today pervasive. We just allow ourselves hypocritically to close our eyes and pretend they are not there, especially if we are not touched by those biases. So the systems, as imperfect as they are actually doing us a favor in making us more aware and more able to improve our thinking and our ability to act. There is hope in building systems that can be complex but are still adaptive. When I traveled to India, I was so delighted to discover, I didn't partake, but still the fact that a huge multinational would understand and adapt its own product offering to local needs, in my opinion, is a premise to make sure that the world is not going to end up as a monoculture that imposes policies, behaviors, rules, and regulations across the entire planet, which in my opinion is not only impossible, but even if it were possible, highly undesirable, because there cannot be a single truth, there cannot be a single solution and a single approach to the multitude of our problems. Technology, in my opinion and my experience, is what allows us to actually be more empathetic, more able to understand each other's point of view, because it enriches the varieties of ways that we can express ourselves, that we can communicate, and that we can, at least, if we are curious enough, glance upon a different point of view and potentially put ourselves in the shoes of others. It is amazing to see how, over the course of time, the diversity of ways of living and the tolerance towards that diversity has actually increased. We are talking about today of a polarized world, of an intolerant world, but we forget of how much progress we have achieved. The dates on the table you see behind me refer in particular to the United States, but you can find similar data all over the world around behaviors that were criminal and then they become legal, with the full understanding that criminalization of a given behavior didn't, of course, eliminate it. It just pushed it underground. And we can ask ourselves, what are going to be the next achievements in our organizing the increased ability that technology gives us to understand the point of view and the lifestyle or the desires and aspirations of others that today we dogmatically refuse. Now, of course, it is a well-known paradox that an increasing tolerance cannot allow to tolerate intolerance. We have to dynamically adjust and understand what are the limits to tolerance and how to protect a tolerant society from being undermined by intolerant points of view. I think it is important that as we celebrate these achievements, we don't forget that, yes, we created a society that we can objectively measure as being more just than not, for example, the society that Romans had on, for example, the measure that it is illegal to own slaves in our times. It is a relatively simple comparison, and I think we can universally conclude that today is better. But that doesn't mean that we are better people. It's not that we don't own slaves because Romans were so much inferior and their moral fiber was so much weaker than ours. What allowed us to evolve and build societies is the technological basis, that using machines and using everything that is available to us in agriculture, in construction, and in so many other areas, actually makes it a better choice not to have slaves. And if we understand that, then we are better equipped to interpret so many other achievements similarly too. Everywhere in the world, it is now illegal to employ children below a certain age. And this has been achieved about 100 years ago, a little more. There were actually articles in the Times of London of celebrated entrepreneurs in the late 1800s that were crying for help because they were sure that their businesses would fail if child labor were disallowed, because they knew that in the mines they had to have children of 8 or 10 years old working to generate the profit that they wanted and wanted to keep. So what are going to be the dogmatic assumptions we have today in society that will feel laughably wrong in 5, 10, or 30 years' time? What will be defining features of today's world that we will recognize or our descendants will recognize were not a necessary part of how we could and should live? And maybe today they are necessary, or we assume they are, because we do not yet have the technologies that will make them avoidable instead. Because we believe that the social contract is immutable, but we actually have an urgent need to intensify the conversation about the dynamic nature of the social contract on a global basis and compare what are the better policies and the better practices that support human flourishing in so many dimensions in one country, while they are hindering the development of individuals and the opportunities that we create in various communities in other countries instead. And today, there is no excuse for a policymaker to adopt suboptimal solutions when so much data is available, when comparatively so much can be learned through the experience of other communities and other countries, adapting them to the local needs, of course. We like to represent our enemies as the machine, the science fiction trope of the dystopian future that puts us in direct conflict with machines and metaphorically with technology is a dangerous one, entertaining but still misguided, because machines have helped us in the past, will help us even more in the future. What we have to understand is that the trajectory of improvement of technology is under our control, and what we have to distinguish is the smart machines, our allies, and the dumb machines that are truly harming us. The current debate, for example, about whether regulators should allow self-driving cars on the streets is tremendously misguided, in my opinion, because the expectation of creating a perfect car driving itself is not the right goalpost. We have to create a machine that drives better than a human. And as soon as that is achieved, we start saving lives. There are 1 million people dying of car accidents today per year. And sooner or later, regulators and policymakers will hear the voice of those who want to start radically reducing those deaths, and they will adopt the policies that allow the self-driving cars to be on the streets without listening to the ever more complicated philosophical experiments of which person under exotic conditions the car will choose to kill in order to save whoever else, which is what is today's dominating narrative. As we explore technology, I always invite people to be bold in just making the first step and experiment. Years ago, when I would talk about Bitcoin, people would come back to me and say, "Oh, I wish I listened to you. Now Bitcoin is worth $100, it's too late." Or a year later, someone else would say, "Oh, now Bitcoin is worth $1,000, now it's too late." And of course, for many, it is not even a question of how much Bitcoin is worth in a given moment or how much it may be worth in the future. It is really the question whether you want to be an active participant in that future, or whether you want to be passively exposed to decisions that are completely driven by others. Now, there are, of course, more extreme ways of experimenting. People who are looking at what does it really mean to become a cyborg, to be a computer-human hybrid. What does it mean, this fabled chip that some people put in their bodies? Are those who do that crazy? What does it even mean? And when you look at the photo, yep, I'm one of those crazy people. The opportunity, when I'm finishing my talk, is for you to actually touch the chip under the skin of my hand You can feel it, it's there. And the question is, oh, what does it do? A lot of things, or not many. When I put it in 10 years ago, it was much more exotic. Today, actually, it is exactly the same function as your touchless bank card or your touchless door knob or whatever else, the NFC technology. But still, let's say about 60–70% of the people coming close and looking suspiciously at my hand, refusing to touch, are executing an experiment themselves. They are touching the limits of their adaptability. They are wondering correctly what is the shape of the world of tomorrow where they will refuse to be a part of. And so we can and we should ask ourselves, as this keeps going, and the crazy experiments are not going to be anymore humble chip in the hand, but the brain implant, and this coming September, November, coming November 30, there is an update from Neuralink, a company that is already producing brain implants, and what their latest achievements are. Well, we have to start the conversation today, what it is going to mean when at the workplace there will be people who have the implant. Or is the competition for jobs going to be excluding them because they are taking advantage of unfair support? Now, I still think that the phase transition we are going through is important, and the debates are unavoidable, and the conclusions not at all clear. It is very important that we start, even though we don't know where we are going to end up. I am an optimist, and I know that as we keep the technology helping us go to places where we haven't before, and not only learning through it how to keep better care of Earth, but actually learning by the 100% sustainable practices that our Martian colonies will implement and export to Earth. We will really learn what it means for technology to allow us to thrive, what it means to be a human in this unstoppable journey together with all of you and all of us and our friends, the smart machines. Now, I will be talking more about this in the main stage at 12:30, so if you enjoyed this one, you can have a second dose in a few hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David, for that. We'll keep you on stage, actually, for this panel discussion as well, if you're
I am happy to join.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I want to invite our other panelists onto the stage. Gilad Goren, the co-founder of partnerships for BitGreen. Gabrielle Aruta, the owner and director of Filo Arts. Kimberly King, the CEO of Human Tech and co-founder and CEO of One Island Institute, and Vanyi-Robin, the founder and CEO of Nozama Green. Please come to the stage. Thank you. Sorry, I realized a moment of rush. I forgot to introduce myself of all people. I'm Quinton O'Reilly. I'm a freelance tech journalist from Dublin, Ireland, and it's wonderful to be here in Lisbon. Kimberly and Gabrielle, can you hear me okay? Just to make sure. Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. So I'll just kick it off. Gilad, I'll start with yourself, if that's all right, since you're closest to me. BitGreen, you offer services using blockchain to help people, organizations meet their impact goal. Can you tell the audience a little bit about it and what you do and how you help organizations?
Sure. Am I on? Yeah? Can you hear me? Yeah? Great. So
Thank you.
first and foremost, we're a social venture that chose blockchain as a technology to fulfill our mission, which is to end the funding gap for impact. So what is blockchain? Essentially, it's an operating system, right? There's many different use cases for this technology. Specifically for us, we're working on tools that connect between the demand for impact capital and the supply, right? We build the rails to connect the dots because there's a $50 trillion funding gap for impact, for solving the sustainable development goals, climate change, and all the rest. So we work in two ways. We partner with companies, and be it a legacy organization like the world's largest conservation network, or Web3 native teams, companies that have a use case for blockchain but may not know how to actually implement, and we'll help them build on top of our blockchain. Separately, we have two of our own applications. The first is focusing on carbon, biodiversity, and plastic credits, which you know a little bit about. So for companies that are looking to offset their carbon emissions or plastic creation or do more in biodiversity, we offer an easy way to buy high quality vetted credits in order to meet their goals. And then the other application is, call it a eToro or a AngelList for impact investing. It's a marketplace solution for companies that are doing the good work and are trying to raise capital. Right now it's in the form of debt, but eventually it'll be also equity and philanthropy. And for investors, people like you or I, who want to invest with their hearts. Right now, impact investing is an incredibly growing industry, but it's one that's siloed away, not really democratic. This marketplace allows anyone to be able to invest for returns, but also for impact. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Fantastic. And David, your talk, I'm just going to reference to Gabrielle because I think there's a lot of parallels to it. You mentioned that like tech is a mirror to the world and how we interpret it and the products we create. And Gabrielle, art is probably the most apparent mirror to the world that we have in terms of how we understand ourselves, our fellow people, and also communicating those different cultures and ideas to other people, to other countries, other perspectives, other demographics. I imagine in your line of work, that is a huge part of what you do through the educational programs, trying to build up that understanding and I guess openness to other viewpoints and other cultures as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And it's a pleasure to be here. I own an art gallery called Filo, Sofi Arts, but my background is that I'm a philosopher and applied ethicist, and I practice civic discourse with children and adults through engaging them with works of art. So I think it's deeply important to magnify the voices of the artists, but also to use that as a vehicle for individuals to understand their values and to be able to have conversations about their moral compass in ways that are outside of religion. I think artwork is a great vehicle that challenges us in meaningful ways and can be an equal starting point. And I have, over the last year and a half, started engaging quite a bit in volunteer work with IEEE, the world's largest technical engineering organization, with their Standards Association and their environmental initiative called Planet Positive 2030. And I've had the opportunity to do a number of workshops with engineers. It was the first time in my career where I've worked with doctors before, training them to sharpen their perceptual capacity before they go to surgery by looking at paintings. But now working with engineers and showing them meaningful and complicated works of art can help them understand better their values as they create the technology that drives us into the fourth industrial revolution. And to David's talk, which I thought was really motivating and optimistic, one of the things that I think is a problem more globally is that the metrics that we are taking, what we're measuring, does not necessarily reflect our values in the most meaningful way. So if we constantly put GDP first, we miss, all of the people and the suffering, or the planet that is suffering, the other meaningful stakeholders that are involved. Because even though it seemingly is the case that slavery is reduced now, I think the latest numbers are that there are 50 million people enslaved around the world, and that there are an eighth of those people are children. The last big art project I did is with a Polish painter named Agnieszka Pilat, who paints portraits of machines and technology, and she teaches robots how to make their own portraiture. Now she's still manipulating all the remote controls at this point. It's not pre-programmed, but she works with Boston Dynamics. And we were showing the relationship between, how can a robot make its own portraiture, but also talk about the role that these machines also play in cobalt mining around the world now, and to draw attention to the negative conditions that are inflicted upon the people of the Congo. So I can have an art show and engage in commerce and promote art in a meaningful way, but also ground it more deeply in the philosophical and the real and the environmental crisis that we're dealing with right now to try to make an impact. And also working with an artist who works with engineers, and she is shaping also some of the technology being made through her interactions with these engineers. So it's a little bit of what I've been doing.
Well, it's fascinating as well, just the sheer amount of like the breadth and scope of that work. It's not just honed into one area, it encompasses everything. And you mentioned environmental, which lovely segue to yourself, Andre, as well. Like plastics, you're wearing the t-shirt, the art of recycling, massive challenge for the world to solve. How are you trying to solve it? How are you tackling this major global issue?
Well, thank you, Quinton, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I founded Nozama, the parent company, in early 2019 in London, and by last summer I came to the conclusion that everybody said they want to save the world, but nobody wants to pay for it. So the focus was therefore on the waste management industry, because the waste management industry is essentially making money two ways. They're making money collecting waste, and then the second one is sorting that waste and selling it to the recycling industry as a feedstock or prime resource. Those are the basic two ways. And then waste recovery projects that are across the world, they, until we arrived, would only consider those sources of revenue. Now, we proposed to allow them to make a third source of revenue, which is converting the invoices from the activity of selling the physical waste to the recycling industry into what we call plastic recovery guarantees, using NFTs, NFT technology. And essentially we're telling them, take the invoice number, take the invoice date, take the type of polymer you've recovered, the quantity of polymer you've recovered, and the destination of this polymer, and convert it into what you would commonly know as a plastic credit. However, we call it a plastic recovery guarantee, where we are guaranteeing that it is going back into the recycling industry. Now, obviously, this is put up for sale on our marketplace. Who is creating these plastic recovery guarantees? Companies in India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Tanzania, Ivory Coast, Egypt, most of Latin America, France and Spain, and they're putting them up for sale for companies that are already in the process of trying to become plastic neutral, clearly. However, they want immediate action. So what they're saying is basically, I'm going to buy these plastic recovery guarantees, and I'm essentially going to fund the recovery of more plastic in all these regions and geographies. So I'm having an impact. And I'm also going to be offsetting my plastic footprint. Clearly, I want to be plastic neutral. Nevertheless, whatever I produce or use or distribute in plastic, I want to make sure that same amount and same type is being recovered from the environment. And by having that traceability, we can allow the companies and their consumers to basically relate to each other, to buy products and services from companies that verifiably show their commitment to the environment. And that way, it is a win-win.
Fantastic. And Kimberly, thank you so much for your patience for waiting. But you're probably the person that has like such a wide breadth of experience in terms of not just business and entrepreneurship, but sustainability and aiding others as well, like through the many years. I mean, we have a lot of potential, like a lot of exciting projects that are happening that we've just heard about now. But how have your experiences been in terms of the build-up towards, say, developing sustainable work, either through new technologies like, say, blockchain or the metaverse, or maturing technologies that we already have, like smartphones, apps, etc.?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to join everyone today. And as you said, my work for many years is really about bringing the stakeholders, the actors, and the entire community that is often working in their own silos, an overused word I know, but the hope of the world to me is when we turn toward one another. So I make that my life's work, because when we facilitate that, we create that empathetic web, because we can finally see and hear one another. And I want to talk about technology that way. I tell people often that I don't always know how the watch is made, but I can tell you what time it is on the planet and what time it is between us. And technology is part of the toolkit of our time. And if in our hands, it can help us do what we need to do faster, clearer, better. Now, what I'm experiencing, I'll go to blockchain for a moment. When I first learned of blockchain, it was like I had a gestalt understanding, not about, again, how it worked, but why it came, where it came from, what consciousness did it come from? Because those of us who have been in this conversation for a long time, we've been describing that world. We've been describing transparency. We've been describing peer-to-peer. We've been working toward that world. To me, blockchain is not creating a new consciousness. The consciousness created blockchain. And it will evolve in its form, but the form is in service to where we want to go. So I find it interesting, kind of dichotomy that we call blockchain, for example, a trustless system. I have a reaction to that word. I think it's a trust more system. I think it's a trustworthy system, or at least we're headed that direction. And that's why we're headed that direction. Because rather than just take my word for it, if you don't know me well, or if we're going to bring more stakeholders together, it's impossible that we have instant trust based on experience. If technologies like blockchain, I'm not blockchain will save the world. Blockchain's the tool that can get us further. But if the net underneath us, if the fabric and the sinew and the bridges between us protect what should be protected, keep that private. Make transparent what should be transparent. It should be known to all. And have it enforced automatically. No, I promise, but the promise is baked into the cake. Then we can free up our energy for relationship, for learning, for innovation, for all the forms of alignment that are necessary for breakthroughs to come. And that is the promise of technology that is worth it to me. So I really love that we're having the conversation this way today, because I'm in a lot of rooms where we want to talk about how the watch is made, and we are totally missing what time it is, folks. And it's time. So I'm loving this conversation this way. Thanks.
And you brought up some wonderful points, especially the element of trust, because having a trustless system kind of negates the idea that we're all humans. We have to trust each other. If we don't trust, there's probably aminicity and other negative feelings that come from it, and we end up in silos when in reality we should be all working together on this and building up that trust and understanding together. David, you did mention about like how tech is a mirror, just kind of going to the wonderful analogy as well, and that we don't necessarily need pointless data. Well, I'm paraphrasing massively, but like we have an opportunity to really delve into the value of our services, our products, whatever you want to call them, and really serve them towards the people, rather than we've created X product, therefore people are going to use it for Y. And instead, we're looking at what's the global, or what's the local, or what's the national, what demographic are we serving, rather than the other way around. Do you find in your line of work and across the globe there's a shift in mindset in terms of the products that are being developed and who they're serving, rather than what is gained from it?
I would fire the product manager that didn't start from that question. So it is not that the analysis of user needs was absent in the development of platforms that we now look at suspiciously because we are realizing that there is an unbalance in the relationship between the users and the platforms. They may not even have started out as part of their mission to be exploitative, but they ended up there. And yes, definitely there is a worldwide awakening that there can be an alternative. And those who are not equipped with the technological skills to design a new generation of products and platforms that can embody these principles should participate by articulating what they feel they are missing. But it is again up to those who are there designing and coding and implementing to make sure that we have a tangible and testable implementation of those aspirations and principles. Today we still don't have an agreed upon definition of what Web3 is. But we do have a series of components, and certainly we can easily find in our day-to-day experience with today's platforms things that are not only not working, but are getting progressively worse. And we are not paranoid in asking ourselves if this worsening of the experience of the current platforms is potentially on purpose. Because the incumbents are protecting their turf. And very, very desirable and quite natural and easily implementable features like interoperability shouldn't be the result of a fight that you conquest, should be the starting point. Or the ownership of your data at the highest granularity, the highest level of reusability, not for compliance reasons, but because it is what puts the relationship between users and platform on the right starting point. It is not something that has been imposed by a regulator. So we will see, and I believe that there will be a pretty fast exodus from the constraints of existing systems as soon as new ones become available, because billions of people are starting to behave differently, more guardedly, more suspiciously in their online participation. And it is a pity, because a lot of the benefits that I mentioned in my introductory talk come to fruition by embracing technology wholeheartedly, rather than in this suspicious relationship.
Your mention of Web3 not being defined is great, because there's so much room for discovery and like building an entirely new sense of collaboration. And Gabrielle, I'll bring yourself into this one in terms of the discovery and the cooperation, because I imagine many projects you mentioned all require communication, they all require working, they all require people to be open to ideas to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. I imagine the way you set up your like exhibitions, your workshops and so on, that discoverability is key of it, because you can start off with one type of idea, but once it's exposed to 5, 10, 15, whatever number of people or audiences, it can turn into something much greater, I imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to the way that I practice the pedagogy around my workshops is a form of pragmatic truth. So they're exercises in critical thinking where we try to aim to come to a consensus about a work of art. So it's not just having individuals give their subjective opinion about whether they like something or not, but to engage in a critical thinking exercise and to really actively listen and learn from one another. And so the truth for that particular day, or that particular session, is not the overarching truth about that work of art, for example, but it's about modeling the kind of behavior, modeling the kind of civic discourse and citizenship that I would like to see elsewhere in the world. Because if we move further and further into Web 3.0 and our lives become increasingly more digital, it's a word I learned from an artist named Penny Stacker, that mix of physical and digital, which is very much how we live our lives now, with one foot in the metaverse and one aspect of our, very concrete lives where you wake up at 3:30 in the morning and a panel and on the other side of the planet. So I'm very much grounded in the real here in my living room, but actively engaged with all of you there. So we need to have these experiences where our critical thinking skills are sharpened through active engagement with others. And again, those works of art are the vehicles for it. A project that I did in Far West Texas earlier this year, I saw one of my artists named Moises Salazar Platenci make a series of sculptures of children, all adorned in glitter. They're all about 4 feet high. And they were meant to represent unattended minors that are crossing the US border, undocumented children. And they are more increasingly being found in the Chihuahuan Desert in Presidio County, Texas, often used by smugglers or coyotes as bait to attract Border Patrol while a group of adults will run in another direction. But Texas has not revealed for over 18 months the number of children that have been detained or found there. So these are, how are these things related? I think that kind of impactful experience of interacting with those works of art, and something that looks quite cute and friendly when you see it in an art gallery setting and you don't recognize that it has a much deeper impact, and to draw to people's attention that the climate crisis is also contributing to the migrant crisis, and to tie all these things together. So, another level of that would be if I was selling NFTs of these particular works, and in this case I'm not, but there are other projects that I do that have that component to them as well. But as our lives become more and more digital, as our identities are more and more digital, and we engage, our avatars become our identities more, we need to do things that remind us that we're human, that challenge us in being human, and that keep us in the physical world as much as possible, so that future generations of humans know what it's like to, be a child in the woods, or to really, have your hands in the dirt and know what childhood is. So we have to protect, the future of the human species, and carve out time to engage with the physical world, and see that reflected through art, because that's going to be the impact. We have these incredible aesthetic experiences in life, and those that are wildly talented and are driven in a way that I can't comprehend are able to press that experience out through their materials onto canvas, into sculptural form. And it's been my labor of love to support these young artists and see that their message gets out, and then I can accompany that with philosophical workshops. Yeah.
And Kimberly, I saw you nodding along quite a bit to what Gabrielle was saying. I imagine lots of what she was saying resonates with you in terms of your line of work, that same kind of core understanding, that same kind of core acknowledgement of, this can't just be a subjective opinion. You have to be able to step back and see what the message is, or what's trying to be communicated, because if you're open to that kind of communication, I imagine that's where a lot of different perspectives and different ideas come into play, and it turns from that, from trustless, what you mentioned earlier, to more trust, which is what we need in this world.
Absolutely. And that's actually part of the grail we're all after. We need to change the questions we're asking ourselves. We're not trying to go faster. I'm not. I want to go faster because I feel an urgency of the many factors and forces and challenges that I know to be real. And I take them seriously, and we should. But I want to go better. I don't want to go faster. I want to go deeper, not just wider. And there's a saying that if you want to change the quality of your life, change the quality of your questions. And we need to change what questions we're asking ourselves, change what questions we're programming into these smart machines, into these extensions of ourselves. I work in inclusion, diversity, and bias in tech, and ethics in tech, trying to always to connect the dots to what matters. But there's another saying: bias in the coder, bias in the code, bias in the question, bias in the answer, in the solution. What questions, what inputs are we giving each other? What expressions are we putting out there through our art? What questions are we provoking through our dialogue? This is not a semantics or even a process point. This is an intention inflection point. We need to get this part mindfully, thoughtfully right. And what comes through us will be on point. We're looking at how we impact nature. And yesterday, a friend of mine, dear person, Mila, talked about how silly it is when we think about nature, that we don't think about ourselves, that nature and us and everything around it's all nature. But I'll still use this metaphor. We're trying to figure out how to correct and support nature, to make things better for nature. I actually think the right point of leverage is to get in touch with our better nature. Our better nature is in alignment with everything we are. And if technology can help me process information faster, get clearer, better, more accurate, or place scenarios more quickly and do that together, that is the point of this enabling technologies that we have. Let's make sure we keep coming back to the point and weave in what matters.
And speaking of which, Andrea and Gilad, you've been waiting patiently as well. I haven't forgotten about either of you in this conversation at all, but it's a great segue to from the conceptual to like the actions that are happening on the ground. And Gilad as well, like with your work with BitGreen, like I imagine there's a lot of interest in terms of like just jumping off what everyone's been talking about using these, thinking about what reframing the questions, I guess, instead of saying X will do Y, it's like, what purpose does this serve? And I imagine that you're getting a lot of interest from different organizations, different industries as well, in how this can change or augment or just improve the way we treat people and treat organizations and the end result rather than the profit and loss element of a business.
Yeah, it's kind of like a spectrum, and on the one side is called the crypto degens. If you know what I mean by that, you're one of them. And then the other end of the spectrum is much more conservative individuals, organizations. Okay, quick show of hands. Raise your hand if you're excited about.
When you hear the word blockchain and crypto, you're interested, you're excited. Raise your hand. Okay, that's called hype. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you're suspicious at minimum, or if you have negative reactions to it. Don't be bashful. There's a lot of people that have it. Great.
For my job, I have to be.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. So that spectrum, right, is also, so those are the emotions that are sort of related to that spectrum as well. And so for us, as I said before, we're a social venture that chooses to use the technology of blockchain in order to meet our mission, which is, frankly, to move $1 trillion into impact projects within 10 years. Because it sounds like a lot of money, $50 trillion is our funding gap. So it's a lot more that needs to be done. And so how do we engage with organizations? We engage with the most stodgiest of conservative organizations. Institutional investors, think like pension funds, man. Right? Pension funds. Massive multinational corporations. When they hear blockchain, they think of all the negatives that you hear about. So step one is actually to explain away the FUD, right? The fear and uncertainty. Explain away the hype. All like the bubbles, NFTs, JPEGs are going to change the world. Move that away. Like, okay, here's the technology, and here is how it addresses your pain points. And once we get to that sort of understanding of what this actually could do, right? Whether it's for the immutability and the fact that the information coming in will be timestamped and hashed so that it'll never be changed. Whether it's about reducing frictions, because you know what? You don't need most of the lawyers that you are hiring for a lot of money, or the escrow agents, right? Because you could build a trust list, to borrow from the terminology you're using. Then it gets interesting. And I think that's our process. And there's traction, right? We have, I'll just use one quick example. We have an agreement with an alliance of 3 of the world's largest foundations who are focusing on renewable energy in the developing world. So the project there, I mean, we're talking about $1.5 billion they want to plow into this. So their pilot project is a hydropower plant in West Africa. And it's a plant that will provide constant energy to an entire country for the first time ever. And this organization, this alliance of foundations, is going to take down, they're doing the origination, they're taking the equity. They're looking for the world to come in and co-invest with them. And they actually reached out to us. And that's because our technology enables the world to co-invest. So that's just an example of actually massive organizations that are open to this technology.
And that kind of impact ties nicely to yourself, Andre. Just we talked about plastics there, and also you have like the single-use packaging tracker, which is such a simple idea but fantastic as well. And those kind of innovations are kind of like, they're not innovative because they're thinking about things in a new way. They're thinking about what the true line is of a product, and plastic is such a great example of that. We think about, for like buying in a shop a bottle and then putting it in the bin, but we don't think about the creation process or what happens after it. That's usually an afterthought. Whereas this and many of the other projects that you're working on have that in mind. You're not thinking about what happens a week or two later. You're thinking about probably, I'd say, years or even decades, considering how long plastics can exist.
Well, from our basic philosophy is we all wake up in the morning, we're exposed to news, right? We see the world going to a horrible situation, and our heart says that we need to do something to make a change. So we leave our homes and then we commute. That experience in of itself, all of you probably know. You get to work and then you start meetings, you start reports, you have relationships with the boss, the employees, the team. By 12 o'clock, you're thinking of lunch. By 3, you start to get a little bit sleepy, looking for your coffee, more meetings. You go home, you've got to prepare food for the kids, then prepare dinner, and then organize the home and go down to take the trash that you've sorted and put it into the right bin. If you live in Europe, you have different colored bins. And you ask yourself the question is, well, is this all worth it? If you're very tired, you probably are not even going to ask yourself the question and just throw it wherever you want. If you're not tired, you'll probably say, okay, I'll put it there. And then that's it. Do you want the fate of the world to rest on that persona? Well, that is 99% of us. 1% of the world can muddle the concept of conservation, but most of the world is just trying to survive. So how do you solve the problem of climate change and waste in the environment? Well, you put the onus on the responsibility of the companies that are the ones selling you their products and services, and they're the ones who are supposed to assume the responsibility of making sure their products and services are not contributing to the environmental problem. And all you can do is choose. You can do is choose which products and services from which companies are you going to buy, because you're going to buy anyway. You cannot not stop buying. That's how we're built. And profit, unfortunately, is gravity. Companies need to make money, people need to survive. So the issue is not technology, the issue is business model. You need to find business models that allow for impact. And ultimately, technology is a tool for those business models. And eventually, the single-use packaging tracking, Nestle is a customer of ours. Ultimately, they're creating multi-product single-use packaging, like the coffee capsule, aluminum, ground coffee, silicone, and plastics. In which container do you put that? The modern waste management systems do not allow the ability to sort multi-product single-use packaging. So you need to make sure that the company is recovering the single-use packaging that they're deploying in the market. And then if they do that and they verifiably prove that they're doing that, you will reward them with your money. You will buy their products. And that is what Nosama and Plastiks is doing, providing that ability to use technology for that, verifiable impact. And that's how we think that it's very important to really take into account business models as the true source of the recovery problem, because we see all this as a recovery problem.
Fascinating. I'm very conscious that we have to wrap up, unfortunately. So just to give everyone one last kind of piece of advice to give, if there is one idea or fact or piece of information you want this audience to take away with them from this talk, what would it be? Kimberly, I'll start with yourself. What one piece of information or fact or idea would you like the audience to take away?
Well, connecting the dots between technology and sustainability. And some have said this is the decade of technology meets sustainability. Again, these are all human choices. I think that's the part that I want you to take away, is that technology can be the accelerator of destruction, or it can be the enabler and accelerator of mass connection and shift together to a better world. And that the ultimate determiner of where we go is not blockchain or Web3, it's humankind and the choices that we make. Let's keep in this conversation, but let's put it into action and make technology an extension of our intention to create a better world.
And Gabrielle, what's one piece of information or advice or fact you'd like the audience to take away?
I have been dedicated to the advancement of philosophy for children throughout my entire adult life. And as our lives are more driven and children will learn about technology and how to use it from younger and younger ages, we need to see around the world and have people champion around the world to have philosophy taught in elementary schools, primary schools, globally, so that children can engage in exercises related to critical, creative, caring, and collaborative thinking. And that knowledge set at a young age, I think, will drive more and more innovators forward. Obviously, the great ethical impacts of the entrepreneurs that you have on stage, and Kimberly also, we're all driven by ethical choices to try to make the world a better place, and we need to nurture that in youth globally to see that we end up on the right side of history together.
Absolutely, and Gilad, I saw you agreeing with Gabrielle on that. I imagine you'll second that, as well as there's probably many other things you'd like the audience to take away on your line of work as well.
Yeah, Kimberly, that was fantastic. So I have a request and a recommendation. Request is, find me if you have any questions, thoughts. Always loving to have these conversations. So I'll be around, or BitGreen.org is our website. Recommendation, I love to give and receive book recommendations, and very aligned with what actually both have said, and your conversation. I'm sure you know this book, given it's what's inspired Cello, is a book called Sacred Economics. It's by a writer and philosopher. His name is Charles Eisenstein. And I remember reading this book in 2011, and it literally broke my brain into two and led me on this long path before I knew anything about crypto. And essentially the basics of it is, you think of money, it's not a given fact, it's a tool, it's a story. And you could truly reimagine it and make it a tool that aligns economic empowerment with social and environmental justice. And that's what we're trying to do. So it's a great book to read.
Great, you've got book recommendation as well. You're getting everything today. And Andre, what would you like to the audience to take away?
Well, let's picture a Kenyan small waste recovery project in Nairobi, and they're trying to find funding, and until technology, all they could do was just pick up waste, sort it, and sell it. Now they can actually sell the data. So the data that proves that they've picked up the waste, they sorted it, and they put it back into the recycling industry. So if it wasn't because of technology, this whole revenue model would not exist. So looking at technology through its business model angle is clearly the path forward.
Fantastic. And David, I'll give you the final word, not to give a piece of advice, but I noticed quite a few people came in during the talk, and I really want people to go see your talk later on today. Can you just remind the audience what the title is, where it is, and what time it's happening at?
Sorry, remind them of my
your talk
past talk or my next talk?
Your next talk, because
okay.
the talk earlier was fantastic, and I really want everyone to catch it if they can.
You're all welcome to hear me talk at 12:35 on the main stage. I will be talking about the role of technology as a driver of sustainability, and in particular about blockchain and decentralized autonomous organizations. As just a final invitation, regardless of whatever opinions you may hold after having read an article or on social media about a technology, don't stop there. The barriers to entry for experimenting with advanced technology today are literally non-existent. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, even exotic things like quantum computers, you can get your hands dirty and form an opinion that is vastly superior by being first-hand than not passively accepting what others tell you. So that is my invitation.
Fantastic. Well, listen, everyone, thank you all so much for your time, your expertise, and just general goodwill and good nature throughout it as well. Well, this conversation could have went on we could have had an entire day dedicated to this conversation alone, but we'll have to leave it there. Audience, if you can just please give your appreciation to David, Gilad, Gabrielle, Kimberly, and Andre, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.